I like discussing controversial topics, so let's start with the most controversial topic in Warzone right now, controller versus mouse and keyboard. And I'm not talking about console versus PC, I'm talking about PC players on controller versus PC players on mouse and keyboard. Now let me preface this with saying that I am a mouse and keyboard player, but I grew up my entire life playing Call of Duty on controller, all the way back since Call of Duty 3. A lot of you watching this probably weren't even born yet when that game came out. Both inputs have their advantages. Mouse and keyboard theoretically has your whole arm to aim. However, most players really only use their wrist when it comes to aiming. But this is still a lot more room than what would be available on a joystick using your thumb. Mouse and keyboard is definitely the more precise of the two inputs because of the larger area for aiming. This makes things like long snipes and very precise tracking a lot easier to do compared to on controller. We can also control the speed of our movements a lot more compared to controller because we can move our arm very quickly to flick from one target to another, or we can slow it down and be precise at the same time. So when you see people like Symphony making these extremely suspicious flicks, it's because one, he's very talented, and two, he enjoys trolling people who don't quite understand the mechanics of mouse and keyboard aiming. Controller, on the other hand, dominates the close quarters realm of Call of Duty, thanks to something called rotational aim assist. A good way of showing how strong rotational aim assist can be is this clip from JGod. At times, this can feel very broken, and for someone like me who doesn't play controller that much, it feels like the game is aiming for you in close quarters sometimes. Controller also doesn't have to be worried about running out of mouse pad. If a player is quickly moving from one direction to the other, let's say in a vehicle, you just keep pressing that direction on the stick. However, with mouse and keyboard, you have to move and reset to keep turning that direction. But controller certainly has its disadvantages. Like I talked about before, you only have your thumb to aim. So because of that, lining up a very long snipe, just moving a few pixels is a lot more difficult than if you had your entire arm to aim. Personally, when I play controller, I feel very comfortable close to mid-range. However, at long range, I feel like an absolute bot because I've lost that fine precision with my thumb since I don't play controller that much anymore. But let's put things into perspective. Remember, Call of Duty is cross-platform, with the majority of its player base being on console. Console going against PC players where they're lacking a FOV slider, playing on much less frames per second, more latency, they need these advantages to go against PC players. But when you combine a PC with a controller, that's where things get a bit interesting. So I wanted to try to find a way that could objectively say which input is better when it comes to Call of Duty Warzone. So what I did was I researched the top 10 earning players in Warzone. There's only one player on that list who plays on mouse and keyboard, and that's Huskers, coming in at the number 4 spot out of the top 10. All of the other 9 players play on controller. But then I had the thought, maybe there's just more controller players out there, or maybe controller players are just better. So I thought, let's compare to another battle royale, Apex Legends. When I started researching them and I looked at their top 10 players when it came to earnings, every single person in the top 10 played on mouse and keyboard. Now I understand the games are different, but at the end of the day, they're both first-person shooter battle royale games. Then I said, let's look at one more. Let's look at Fortnite. And only 2 of the top 10 play on controller. And to me, that is what speaks volumes to what the superior input is when it comes to Warzone. If the majority of the elite players are playing on a certain input, it seems like that's the one that has more advantages. Now, I'm not saying that aim assist needs nerfed into the ground so that the mouse and keyboard players can rise to the top. Aim assist is absolutely needed in order for controller players to compete against someone on mouse and keyboard. But I think in the current state of the game, Call of Duty is a controller game. Now you're probably thinking, why don't you just switch to controller if you're going to complain about aim assist this much? And trust me, the thought has crossed my mind a time or two. But when I finally got a PC a few years ago and I started playing on mouse and keyboard, it made me basically fall in love with shooter style games again because of some of the things that mouse and keyboard can do that controller just simply can't. And although I do get very frustrated at times with how strong aim assist can be in certain situations, I also look at it as a challenge to improve my own aim, because when I'm playing mouse and keyboard, I know the only thing aiming is me. In a perfect world, there would be no argument needed to discuss which is better, controller or mouse and keyboard. And in the majority of games, you would see that The top players were split 50-50 when it came to controller versus mouse and keyboard. But with cross-platform and cross-input likely going to be the future of gaming, game developers are going to have to figure out a way to manage the two inputs to make them an even playing field. So after all of that, what do you think?